This resource is all about ways to optimize your running performance, especially from the perspective of reducing the likelihood of injury. Today we'll be covering understanding adaptation, load management, mobility, conditioning, and recovery strategies. Our bodies are very complex and should not be simplified beyond excess. We're constantly changing and adapting to the stresses we place on our bodies. Consider exercise as a stimulus. We want the adaptation process after loading our muscles, bones, and tendons in such a way. Providing the loads are applied at an acceptable rate will improve our tolerance to it. The acute to chronic workload looks at how much you're asking your body to do today versus how much you've been asking it to do each day over the past 28 days. With load management, consistency is key, so we want to avoid large spikes in activity. Research has shown the more used to training we are, though, the more we can tolerate these increases. For mobility, a lot of people think the more the better, but actually it's more important to have strength throughout whatever range of motion you have. Let's get our bodies used to working throughout its accessible range. Specifically for running, this includes ankle, hip extension, and hamstrings, especially for faster paced efforts. Here are 3 videos of ways to improve hamstring mobility. So starting off with the extender. So you'd hold behind the thigh and then just gently extend the knee, keeping the foot in a nice and relaxed position. This next one is going into a down facing dog position. So the real important point here is to drive those heels down into the floor to feel an increase in the hamstring and calf flexibility. The third one is an inchworm. So you walk out into a plank position and then keeping the legs straight, walk those feet back in towards those hands. Moving on to ankle mobility, our main aim is to ensure that there's symmetry between right and left ankles in order to allow for an even running gait. This picture here shows one option of measuring the ankle flexibility, so it's the knee to wall test. So give this a try in your own time to see if there's any differences that you need to work on. With typical calf stretches, whether it be with your back leg straight or bent, you should feel the stretch within the main muscle belly of your calf. If, however, you feel the restriction around the ankle joint itself, you may wish to try this banded mobilization. To get true hip mobility, we need to first dissociate the hip movement from the lower back movement. With this deep lunge position, we want to drive the hips down to feel a stretch at the top of your back leg. Whilst keeping the legs still in this position, you are fixing the hips and then we are rotating from the torso. So once again, this is dissociating the back region from the hip itself. In this 4-point stance, we want to engage from the core and this time keep the back as still as possible. We're then going to be extending from the hip to work through that range of motion. Alternate sides as if the running position is happening. Reduce the height of the leg if you feel your back is arching at any point. The glute bridge is a third way to focus on hip extension. Drive up from the hips, squeezing from the buttocks as you go. Research suggests that strengthening exercises are more effective than static stretching at reducing the likelihood of injury. With running, there should be a large focus on single leg exercises, as during the running gait you're either in flight phase, so both feet are off the floor, or weight bearing on a single leg at any time. Single leg exercises require greater pelvic stability from the contraction of both the hip and trunk musculature. Progressing on from the double leg glute bridge we saw in the mobility section, this exercise can also be completed on a single leg for greater actual strengthening gains. The single leg RDL is another great way to strengthen specific for running. On the way down, you want to focus on having a straight line between your shoulder and then the back leg. On the way up, drive up from the standing leg, so really engage from the buttocks as you go. Again, this is a progression of one that we saw in the mobility section. This time we have our knees off the floor, so it's greater for the core contraction. Engage from that core, keep your back flat, and then extend from those hips. Within this conditioning section, we also want to look at hip exercises to replicate that knee drive action. Here we have the reverse lunge. So there's two ways of doing it. We can either go into the reverse lunge and back up to standing, or make it more running specific by going down and driving up into that hip flexion position. The final area we wish to strengthen is the calf, specifically the soleus. This is required during the push-off phase of running. A certain element of tendon stiffness around the ankle is vital to decrease the ground contact time and therefore increase your running efficiency. You can perform heel drops off a step with a knee bent to focus on the soleus. Alternatively, trying the single leg bridge position with raising up and down onto your tiptoes, or equally go into a split squat position and raise the front leg heel up and down. The last phase to consider is recovery. Nutrition, sleep, rest, and the reduction of general stresses all play a part in your recovery. The rest phase after exercise is when our bodies make those adaptations. Loading too frequently can therefore mean this is disrupted, hence an increase in the risk of injury. Load correctly, mobilize, condition, and recover. Happy training, guys!